So, hello and welcome everybody to a special edition of Quantum Connections with us, David and Bella from the David and Bella QPW channel. And again, we're in conversation with our wonderful brother, the one and only Stefan Burns. Hello, brother. How are you?
Hey, hello, welcome. Thank you for having me on the channel. I'm excited, as
Right.
always.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you back. And this time, thankfully, we have a much better internet connection and we're going to be able to flow through this one a little bit easier. But of course, our brother Stefan has his own channel. He is a geophysicist. And how do you describe yourself these days, brother? Space weather reporter, I think, or
I just go through a whole bunch of labels, and labels are kind of meaningless. But space weatherman, geophysicist. I've been just playing with the idea of Renaissance man recently, but just a human being that has a curiosity and likes to explore things.
Every time I watch your videos, I think of you as like the sun messenger. It's like the big
Mm.
representative from the sun. So
Yeah, I have my Mercury in Leo and everything else in Leo, so it makes sense.
yeah,
you
there's
would
definitely a
be.
lot of Leo energy coming through, bro. That's for sure. But that's why we wanted to have a chat with you today because we all have an interest in astrology and been loving what you've been putting into your recent shows. And congratulations, brother, on the expansion of the channel and the increase in the viewership. Because what that really means is that more people are getting exposure to this information that you're sharing, which is absolutely, I think, critical right now to understand that the conductor in our universe is a highly intelligent being who is actually overseeing and orchestrating, in conjunction with the music of the spheres and the other planets, this whole ascension evolutionary process that we're in. So it kind of makes sense with this big Chiron Cazimi ahead of us in just 5 days' time, which sort of loop backs to the April 8th eclipse Chiron Cazimi of last year, to have another look at the incoming astrology for the 12th of April with the full moon in Libra, but also to really bring in this energy of the sun, because it feels to me, Stefan, that we're kind of working as a collective intelligence now, us humans down here in the noosphere, Mother Earth, but also Father Sun. So, how do you feel about all of this, bro, as we head into this critical piece?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the consciousness of the sun because it's like a very polarizing thing for some reason. Like some people just makes perfect intuitive sense. Like, hey, if I can be conscious, why couldn't something that's way, way, way bigger than me and more complex be conscious? And then other people are like, bro, you've lost your mind. Like how the sun is conscious, like you're nutso. It's like, okay, maybe you're not conscious. But it's just it just we you can go through the science of it too. There's so much science supporting it, but I don't think you even need to. I mean, just looking at this from a bit of a broader, like a little bit more open heart and crown chakra open perspective, it just makes sense. And so, yeah, we were talking right before we started recording about these two big coronal mass ejections that launched from the sun recently. They did not get launched towards Earth. Instead, both of them were lined up directly to Jupiter. And
Mm.
you mentioned, David, how coronal mass ejections and just the launch of energy from the sun is intentional. Of course, I think that's the case as well. Um, and so then we can start to work with the known astrological tradition and the science of it and add on these new 20th and 21st century understandings, which more and more people are doing. You know, the three of us being some of those people, but the room's kind of empty. And so, but there's so much to it. Like, okay, we have the active astrology. We're going to go through that in this video, but we also have the fact that these two massive coronal mass ejections were launched directly to Jupiter. How has that modified the astrology? And how does Jupiter work with us energetically? Or if it was a different day, different year, maybe that coronal mass ejection was sent to Venus or something like that. And I think this is a really important new way to look at astrology and also consciousness because plasma has that consciousness. The sun has consciousness, and then it can imbue plasma with consciousness. It just is. It's like when you have one of these creeper vines, the plant is conscious. We know plants are conscious. But what happens if you cut the vine and you put it in a bottle of water, right? The plant, the little vine is its own plant now. There has to be some sort of differentiation of consciousness. And I have one of these vines in my bathroom. I have a whole bunch of them I've cut off from a main host plant, so like right up there. And all the others have rooted, and this one in my bathroom is like, bro, I don't want to do it. And it's like being so stubborn. It's had so long. It just, I need to put it in some soil or something, but it has its own consciousness. It's clearly saying, dude, I'm not like the other ones. But just like a month ago, it was literally all one plant. So it speaks to how we are also just like a nested system of consciousness in our body, our spirit, in the solar system itself, and even beyond that, right? So I love our synergy, and I'm really excited to dive into things.
I want to share something then connected to the Jupiter.
Mm.
So I think that the reason why Jupiter received that huge amount of plasma and solar energy is because when you do the chart for the beginning of the year, which happened in the equinox, the beginning of the astrological year, Jupiter was at 16 degrees of Gemini. And when we talk about that, it has to do with communication, not new ideas, but more consciousness and also the abundance factor. And that happens to be the ascendant of the US. The Jupiter in the US chart is at 14 degrees as well. So I feel that is all of the energy that Jupiter is going to contribute for this process of the big change that is about to happen. So a little bit of beneficial energy so that the process, because it's going to be so big and collapse so many things, we need a little bit of that beneficial and blessing energy coming from Jupiter. I think that's my idea because it also connects to finance, to the new economic system, to everything. And the US is the center point for all of these new beginning. So I think that is part of the connection of what Jupiter maybe said, I'll help with this. Boom.
I hope so. We also see Jupiter's moving into Cancer soon, so its exaltation, its domicile. So like it's going to be a lot better in its expression of energy soon. So, but maybe a little bit of a rough start. I think it already is a little bit of a rough start,
It
but
is.
for us that are not really, trapped in that picture, it's fine. But
It's what we've been preparing for.
Absolutely. And, I was just chuckling to myself. I've written here that Stefan's plant must have been Piscean. It's like how to be the individuated drop of consciousness in the sea of consciousness. And I think that your plant in your bathroom is perhaps trying to bring that home. Or maybe just say he doesn't like the bathroom too much and wants a different
could be that.
location. But this is the world that we live in, dude, and this is why we love talking to you too, and love what you do because it's like when we're animist, we see the animated nature of Great Spirit in everything. I've been joking with some of my colleagues recently in my meditation shed in the back garden. Some wasps have moved in, and I've been forced to sit and meditate in that space with these wasps. They're vicious looking things, and it took a couple of weeks for me to get past the fear, then to be able to sit in the dark. But now, because I've sat and studied these guys so much in their natural habitat, I've actually grown quite fond of them and started to be able to, at least in a limited way, communicate with them slightly telepathically. So it's all like nice and calm in there. They have their space, I have mine. Everything's cool. I've got to watch them as a family unit, how they build their houses, how one goes out, how one does something else. And it's kind of remarkable that when you spend time, this is where our friend Dandelion, who we're going to talk about today, is when you take the time to become centered and silent or still for a while and you look around in nature, there is so much going on all the time that teaches you about, first of all, Mother Nature and the interconnectedness of life, but how this can be expanded out to the planets, the sun, the moon, maybe the fixed stars, extraterrestrial beings coming from those stars, all manner of different things. And as we go through this ascension process and upgrade, or perhaps even just remember our own holistic nature, we're actually able to start communicating with other types of intelligence, not just from planet Earth, but off planet too. And when we think about some of our favorite plants and fungi, many of those clearly are not from this planet originally, right? So, as we kind of expand into this holistic space, I think what we're being encouraged to do is, first of all, drop belief systems that tell us you can't communicate with the sun or you can't communicate with the plant in the shower. Well, all that does is reinforces the fact that then we've been separated from these things because everything around us is part of this world and therefore part of the interconnected web of life.
And for us, it was actually Dandelion, the first one that came to talk to us, connected us, talked to us about astrology, and said he was going to be the teacher. It was the very first immersion we did with a group and with something that we put together, which was quantum plant healing. And he was the leader and sponsor, and he said he was going to teach us about time. He was going to teach us about multidimensionality, how we are multidimensional beings, and how to access those levels of multidimensionality through the teachings of Dandelion. And it's been spot on. It's like the sponsorship has been amazing all this way.
And just to add something else, Stefan, before we get your opinion on this beautiful plant dandelion, is, what the botanists realized studying dandelion for so long was that this is a plant or a being that has the ability to change its DNA at will itself to adapt to any environment. They tried to classify dandelion a long time ago and they ran into thousands, and then they quickly realized that they simply couldn't classify the plants because every single one was different. So here we get this overriding consciousness of the dandelion being, but clearly super individuating itself to be able to adapt to grow in the cracks, to give a lawnmower aficionados the world over a series of nightmares as they continue to take over their lawns and all of these other things. But when we think about this ability of dandelion and we go to the quantum plant intelligence level and retro engineer back into the quantum space, what this plant has told us, I can help repair your DNA, which, if we think about many things that's happened over the last 4 or 5 years, could be really, really important. And as we repair our DNA, do inwards meditation, study our natal birth astrology charts, ask questions about who am I, what am I here, we start to realize that all of the answers are inside of us. All we have to do is become still, momentary, maybe take a little bit of dandelion medicine with the intention I want to reconnect all 12 strands of my DNA. And with quantum entanglement intention, that is exactly what will happen, as we've been discovering, many hundreds of people who followed us have been discovering. So just wanted to put that in there as a kind of a temporal marker about the wonderful dandelion plant, but also maybe as a way of setting a plant-inspired astrological metronome. And of course, with dandelion's wonderful connection to the sun and the cat beings as a kind of a preface to what we're going to talk about in more detail today.
Yeah, and dandelion's blooming like crazy right now. So like as we're filming this, it's what, April 7th? And so this is like dandelion season in the northern hemisphere. And also there's a second flush in the fall, so also for the southern hemisphere as well. And I think this is dandelion is like found literally everywhere across the planet. It grows just completely crazy in Iceland, which is a tiny little isolated island. So you can go to these places that are far flung and you'll find dandelion. And just like humans, we're one of the few animals that's all across the world and beyond. And I think there's a certain resonance there that it's very much mirroring kind of the collective human expression as well, and us of it, about how we're undergoing this new blooming process, and soon that flower metamorphoses into all the different seeds and we distribute out. And I think that's where we are right now as well, with some of these really big changes that are undergoing, especially as you mentioned with this Chiron Cazimi, and the echoes of that going all the way back to April 8th of, was that last year?
Last year, yeah.
And that's a pretty, I mean, to have that exactly conjunct by degree and minute on an eclipse, and a significant eclipse,
Yeah.
as it relates to some of these themes in the United States, as we discussed. And so, yeah, I think, like, why is there this war against dandelions in the public and needing to, their scourge and to get rid of them on the lawn? It's really just like limiting our own self-expression and spiritual evolution. And who's put that programming into us, and like finally releasing that and embracing, our divinity, you could say. And I think these themes, Venus finally going direct right after the full moon, which she's the ruler of, she's in her exaltation.
She is.
There's a really nice energy culmination occurring from April 11th to the 13th or so. And so, yeah, it's going to be great to give this forecast to everybody.
Yeah, we'll get into that towards talking about the full moon. So that's part of the conversation of today. But to wrap up the dandelion, it is showing us and reminding us of our resilience. We are such resilient beings, and this is the moment to show that part of ourselves. As the storm is here, collapsing everything. I have to mention that on the 12th of April, not only is it a full moon, but it's the rebirth of Venus as she comes after her 40-day journey in the underworld, but also is called the galactic return of the year in the Mayan cosmology, because it's the day of the energy of the whole year. What started on the 26th of July comes back as the full storm on that day as well. reminding us that there was a reason for that storm, and it's to achieve balance and harmony. But we need to go through the process of the storm, which is what Chiron is also teaching us. So it's super exciting. There are so many things converging on that day.
Right, which is kind of why we love the Mayan time code technology, because once you get a feel for each of the 20 different glyphs and the 13 different tones, hence the 1320 calendar, you can start to basically feel into the energy as it's coming towards you. And then when you drop the astrological trigger points and even the fixed star activations behind those, you get this incredible quantum map, really, of what is coming towards you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can predict everything accurately, but what it does give you, and as we've talked to you before, and our audience knows, it gives you this sort of gestalt of the incoming energy patterns. And as we have those energy patterns and get better at reading them, this is where we can really start to communicate with the sun and say, hey, but by the way, it'd be really good if we had a bit of this right now, because it would really help maybe the crops, or maybe bring down some more of those structures that need to fall down, or whatever it might be, you know, because I do think that as we move forwards, and maybe dandelion is part of the totem for this, being so connected to the sun, but also the moon too, you know, there is a lot of time aspects related to dandelion. But as we move forwards, we have all of these different components that we can use as tools, pretty much like you've been doing with the different readings on the geophysics, on the sun, on the Schumann resonance, all of which is giving us a much bigger picture of the world that we live in. I mean, we're so much more informed, dude, compared to like even 3 years ago, and certainly 5 or 10 years ago. And that's partly down to the technological advancements, but it's also because our consciousness is expanding and we're collaborating more. We're bringing in different threads that people weren't bringing together before.
Talking about that, I've always wanted to ask you this, Stefan, and what is your take on the Schumann resonance? Because on the 25th of March, we were telling you just before the call that it was the beginning of the new Solkin, the 260-day energy, and it was the energy of the dragon, the magnetic dragon, which is like full electromagnetic energy starting again. And we saw the energy in the Schumann resonance just go off the charts. And I was like, oh my God, I need to ask Stefan, what is going on here? Like, what is your take on the Schumann resonance and all of these spikes? Because I saw it go up like during maybe the week before, it started to go up in different scales. But then that day it just went off the charts.
Well, I mean, I have a little bit of a nuanced take on it in perspective of kind of both the different things I think are at play. The Schumann resonances are these natural wavelengths of light that form standing waves. The frequencies overlap with our brain waves and our body rhythms. The foundational mode is like 8 hertz. And they're observed globally because they're created by the Earth itself through lightning strikes and a variety of other phenomena, but primarily lightning strikes, of which there's about 50 per second. So you always have this standing wave being fed with energy, and it's reverberating because it doesn't dissipate quickly. If it dissipated quickly, it wouldn't be there stably, but it has a very slow dissipation, so it's always pulsing. And it goes up in power and down in power, and it changes its frequency slightly within its range of about 7.2 to 8.8 hertz for the foundational mode. And it's connected to like the global temperature. You can use this like a global thermostat, and it's connected to space weather and earthquakes, and you know, of course, our bioelectricity and our everything, right? So there's in consciousness, so we can look at it and look at these things through that lens, but we also have to keep in mind that it's connected to all those things. So you can't just point and pin one thing on it. So like local weather will affect the Schumann resonances, depending on where you're observing them, right? Your just background vertical electric field or your magnetic field. So if there's a thunderstorm overhead, your local Schumann resonances will be amplified, but Easter Island or Hawaii may be fine if it's normal weather there. And so the thing is, though, is that the vast majority of people that track the Schumann resonances, they do so through a specific observation station. This is the Space Observing System, and it's in Tomsk University, and it's run by the Technical University there. For some reason, I don't know, no one knows, maybe someone does, but for some reason, that's the one that everyone looks at. There are some other publicly available stations, and you can see the readings out of Tomsk, Russia, go nuts, and the one in Hungary may be fine, because there is a thunderstorm in Tomsk, and there isn't one in Hungary. But we do see this alignment of notable things at times, not every time, to be fair, not every time, but we do see this alignment of notable things happening and changes in the power of the spectrogram out of Tomsk. And so my belief, I think you'll resonate with this very much, is that there's multiple ways to express something. So it's not necessarily that the global Schumann resonances are increasing amplification during specific days every single time. There are events like that. For example, when Hunga Tonga erupted January 15th, that created a global electromagnetic spike that was felt everywhere. Things like that, or space weather impacts, can do that. But I think sometimes spirit knows that most people look through that station, and so it creates, there's like a little bit of like a quantum entanglement,
The
or
observer effect.
yes, exactly. And so that's why so many people are watching that, and that there's therefore more activity that does seem to line up coherently with some of these things. But it is like, because of, let's say, a thunderstorm, because they actually have a lot of activity like that in that area in terms of like snow will cause problems, rain, even haze. Like, it's a multitude of atmospheric factors which can influence a local field. But because of this this quantum observer effect, and God, spirit, whatever you want to say, right? Just consciousness knows that so many people watching that, it specifically kind of pushes things there. And it may
So,
use a thunderstorm to convey that, even though it's not a global thing. People say it's global, right? But it is, but it's not. So it's like, it's a little complicated and confusing, but that's my best understanding of it, because there is something to it.
so the spikes are electrical or electromagnetic?
Anything that's electric or magnetic is electromagnetic, but specifically for that station, they measure the vertical electric field. So you're measuring the global electric circuit and those subtle vibrations upon it. Um,
Because what I'm getting from all of these Schumann resonance is that with our nervous system being a circuit, an electrical circuit as well, with our neurons and all of our connections, what it's doing is amplifying that energy through our brain, being like an antenna. So we're receiving the massive waves through our brain, which to me is about expanding consciousness. Every time we have a big spike, it's like, and I feel that that's what's been preparing us for the last, even from the time that we started the year of the storm, that our circuit's been preparing for it. That's why we recommend taking horsetail, because it helps us kind of modulate all of that electrical current that comes into our field, or grounding, which is also, I know you talk about grounding a lot.
You know what, dude? I was just written here in my notes. How much is Stefan's show having an effect on the Schumann resonance? 200,000 people watch some of those shows, bro. That's a lot of people to put collective awareness and intention into the field. And as any one person becomes more consciously aware of themselves and every single thought that they have, every impulse they put out into the collective noosphere, if 200,000 conscious people are doing that, it is absolutely going to have an effect on the Schumann resonance. How or why? Well, I guess that's still part of the mystery, but so and also this thing about horsetail is also really important. It's a really silica-based plant. Probably the plant,
Mhm.
Stefan, right? And we've been talking about the three plants that people should use in this period: dandelion, horsetail, and wormwood. They pretty much cover everything and anything, physically, spiritually, emotionally, that you might need to,
Energetic.
energetic, that you might need to pivot through or alchemize through. Dandelion, as we were just talking about, dandelion has that incredible ability. Even just a little bit of root will grow back. That's why it's such a great liver medicine. It really, using the doctrine of signatures allows the liver to grow back, but also it's very good at detoxing heavy metals. And there have been a lot of those flying around in people's systems for a while, whether it's coming from the air, the water, the food, medications, all of the above. Dandelion is a great plant to get rid of that, but horsetail is really good in supporting that because it gets rid of graphene. Graphene is another one of those toxic heavy metals that unfortunately seems to have found its way pretty much ubiquitously into the environment, but isn't really super good for humans, despite its incredible, properties of strength. And so horsetail has the ability to allow us to receive more light, but it can only do that if we basically have released the density, the ballast, or what we might call the shadow, which is why it's a great semiconductor when we have solar flares, because it actually is able to conduct that energy and fill our fields with more light. But if we're still carrying a lot of density in our field, it might cause us a few physical disturbances. So just to put that out as a disclaimer, but this plant, we've both dieted with it, and we have definitely seen the effect of graphene passing through our system in our urine. So we know that it works. And dandelion also is great diuretic to help that process. And of course, the beautiful plant wormwood is kind of basically the basis for ivermectin. So highly anti-parasitic, both at the physical level, but also the energetic level. But all of that is a precursor to really what we wanted to talk about today, which is the astrology that is incoming for the 12th, and to get your opinions about all of it, Stefan, because we know that you follow astrology too, and you've been picking out certain conjunctions and obviously following the activities of the sun. And most of all, the Cazimis, we have this powerful full moon in Libra, which really speaks about so many things we'll get into in a minute. But we also have this Chiron Cazimi kicking off this sequence. So I'm just going to open up here and pull up a little slideshow we put together just to give this a little more gravitas. So,
and it's the first full moon since that eclipse that we had with the new moon for this big cycle of this astrological year. So what it says is that being the first full moon after the eclipse we had at the end of March is like the big changes. We get to see the big changes, full on display of what's to come.
Right. So we just preface this here because today is the beginning of the second wave spell, Stefan, of this new Zolkin. The first one, the first 13 days we just completed yesterday, which was the dragon, which basically hit the same moment that CME plasma hit us. It was the same day that we were working with this energy, and now we've entered the second wave spell of the 260 days Zolkin, which is the wave spell of the White Wizard, which, as you can see from the image we've used here, is really synonymous with the energy of Jaguar magic. So this is really all about activating the inner shaman. And so, as you know from our previews, what we like to do is feel into the energy of what's coming towards us, then take a pulse on where the collective energies are and see why we might be needing to go into basically what is a 13-day kind of semi-plant medicine space with the inner Jaguars, of course, very connected to plants like ayahuasca and many other South American plants, but also really speaks to us of the inner Jaguar warrior, right, Bella?
So it could be the ayahuasca moment for the world.
We don't want to necessarily scare people, but, you know, we have been tracking the thinning of the veil. And really, if we understand what does the veil thinning look like, well, it's the revealing of the things that we've been had hidden from us, which could be something a little bit like a plant medicine ceremony, seeing the things that are sort of in the non-physical spectrum, but more easily opening up more of the third eye, less of the perhaps dense energy frequencies that perhaps are blocking our reality in some way. I guess we're going to know better by the end of these 13 days, but this is really the energy that we're starting today on when we're doing this interview with you. And so
Seems
I've just
to already be happening. Like
yeah,
I already, people are really starting to, you know, you need a certain level of like impulse to get people to respond or just things to respond, right? There's a certain significance level you could say, and I think we're hitting that with certain things right now collectively. So seems right on.
From what you've seen, do you feel the mass awakening happening, or do you feel it's still too early stages?
Well, there's like so many awakenings that need to happen. Like the video I just released today was on how satellites affect the Earth geophysically, and this is potentially a very serious problem. But basically, no one knows about it.
Yeah.
And then there's like, you know, a billion other things. So how do you, you can't keep this all in your head, though you may want to, right? And you can't do something about everything. So it's like, what is the most important thing that we all kind of need to awaken around? And that all, in my mind, kind of seems to circle back to just activate our own spirituality and Christ consciousness, because that will kind of purify and move everything forward just naturally. And I see a greater polarization being built, but now there's lightning that's flying in between the polarities, right? I think these polarities have grown so large, people are starting to realize that's like, I need to do something. I can't just say I believe this and then have people respect that. Now it's a time of action. I actually have to do something. I may have to make a sacrifice for something I believe in. And this is a higher expression of just consciousness in general, willing to do these things and not just be a slug, basically.
Right, couldn't agree more. In fact, we did a live stream to some of our own followers on YouTube today, and we were just talking about this. Is like, you know, in order to really get involved in the process, you kind of have to participate in it. And if you sat back on the sofa passively waiting for somebody on the TV to deliver something to the front door that's going to make it all okay, you could be here a while And it's also not that much fun. It's much more fun to be an active participant in the unfolding theater that we all signed up for. You know, we always remind our audiences that every one of us contracted ourselves into this experiment, this experience. And whatever this experience is, it's what we signed up for, whether it's individually or collectively. And rather than get bent out of shape about the polarizing nature of duality, we can kind of go more to our eagle's perch, fifth dimensional self, and maybe even open into the Christ consciousness of the sixth dimension and above with our hearts. But you know, once we get to that place, we can kind of have a little bit more of a chuckle about things and the absurdity of some of what is presented to us, but also understand that it's just duality. And whenever we come across polarizing forces, you know, day 2 of any wave spell is the challenge day. And you know, those days are when any kind of dualistic polarization that you might have in yourself, in your world, will come up so that you can alchemize it. And every time you alchemize something, you give more energy to the expansion process, which is probably why the sun gave Jupiter a good old whack the other day and said, hey, we need some more of that expanding energy. So, you know, what do you think about that, Stefan, before we get into the other aspects? You know, what do you think was the major overriding message of the sun communicating with Jupiter in that way?
Well, this first and foremost, the date of the first coronal mass ejection launched towards Jupiter was March 28th. And it depends on the velocity of this solar storm when they're launched out for how fast it travels through the interplanetary medium. And if there's a lot of plasma density, it'll go slower because it hits that and kind of has to work against the pre-existing plasma and consciousness, therefore, of the solar wind. The more ambient consciousness, maybe even like the subconscious. But it would take about 2 to 3 days for something like that to reach Earth. And Jupiter is 5 times further out. So that's kind of your metric. So if we call it 2 days, then that's like we're basically coming up on that moment now where it's hitting Jupiter directly. But there was already effects that came in immediately after that flare occurred, because we had what's known as a radiation storm, which also hit Earth. So there was two effects. There's the solar storm that launched, which is slower, but then there's these particles that can travel near the speed of light. They reach Jupiter probably almost instantly, you know, maybe 30 minutes later or something, and they've been hitting Jupiter basically since. And they will increase up till that storm is either hitting now, or it's hit just a day or two ago, or it's soon to come in. Now, the second coronal mass ejection was launched on the 5th of April, I believe, just like a couple days ago. So that one has not hit Jupiter yet, though that also triggered a radiation storm. That one's already hitting Jupiter. So it's kind of a multifold process. So I think there's just the sun wanted to energize the largest planet in our solar system, a storm world, right? There's lightning all across it. If you know, there's scale invariance between the human brain and our neural synapse firing, our neural spiking, and the Earth and lightning strikes. You know, there's basically all the lightning on Jupiter are super bolts. Like they actually have satellite imagery where they captured like the flash of a lightning strike, and you see just how big it is. You're like, holy cow, like these are insanely huge lightning strikes on Jupiter. They're probably also scale invariant with our own consciousness in the Earth, or similar to that. You know, there's something there. Some sort of like, okay, Jupiter, you need to like wake up a little bit. And then B, Jupiter has this amazing ability to take these energies and then rebroadcast them out, both through radio waves and also through what's known as Jovian flux. It's the only planet that really does this of any significance. So I think it was also like Jupiter needed this, you could say, or the sun thought Jupiter needed this, and then also wanted Jupiter to be the one to work with the energy and then broadcast it out through the rest of the solar system, because the sun can launch a coronal mass ejection and it won't hit everybody. It does expand as it goes further out, so the outer gas giants are more likely to be hit, but at a lower density. But by sending it to Jupiter, there is in some way an ability for that energy to then be formatted into a new sort of energy package, whether these radio frequencies, these more auroral emissions, or as the Jovian flux, and then that goes out throughout the entire solar system. So I think it was just kind of a little bit of a Sun-Jupiter handoff. And why specifically? I just had a dream, maybe like a few weeks ago now, and it was just a dream of inspiration. I think we just need more inspiring energy, and Jupiter is very resonant with that. So um, I think right now there's a lot of people who are just really crushed and down. My one friend, she's like having panic attacks now because she's just like really freaked out about what's happening in the country. Because I mean, she's great, she's wonderful, but she's still a little in that
Worry.
dualistic view,
Mm,
right? A lot of people are there.
yeah.
I mean, we may not be, or at least, you know, I try. I think I'm pretty non-dual most of the time. But a lot of people are. And I think just having a surge of optimism and inspiration for everyone is just doing a lot of good. Doesn't matter where you are or if you're not there at all, right? I think that's just a good thing for everybody. So I think that's just kind of
Yeah,
one of the reasons. There's probably so many more that we won't even figure out
good
I
ones,
think
collectively.
though.
I think it's a beautiful orchestration of the sun and Jupiter. And as you said, optimism is part of that Jupiterian energy that is coming to us now because we absolutely need it. And the day that you mentioned there, the 28th of March, was the new moon in Aries with eclipse energy. So it's
Yeah.
like charge for the eclipse, which is also the energy of what we were talking about. What happened last year on April the 8th was we shifted to a higher timeline. And we talked to our a friend, our ascended master, Zach, and he told us the Earth actually shifted to a new cuboid of the universe through that eclipse point on the 8th of April. So I wouldn't be surprised if now we're doing yet again another shift. Yes.
And you just kind of piqued my interest of something you said, Stefan. And, many people have talked about a so-called EBS, an emergency broadcast system. Well, maybe this is our universe's version, the Jovian broadcast system, which are like,
Mm.
we're going to give you a heads up of some of the incoming energy so that you can start to feel disclosure, truths, even see your own polarized dualistic nature. And, if people are not sure how to know if you're still getting caught in duality through polarization, anything that triggers you where you set yourself up in opposition against somebody else, that's a dualistic situation. There's always a way to meditate through something until you come to a place of being okay with everything. Once you realize that most challenges that are brought to you that you perceive to be difficult or polarizing your opinion, and of course there are many of those in North America and the world in general at the moment to choose from, that's your opportunity to go inwards, sit under a nice tree or in a meditation space and go inwards and say, well, why am I getting triggered by this? How much do I really care about this that much that I want to lose friends over it, to have a big trolling row on social media over it, or whatever the situation might be? Or do I just want to say, you know what? Thank you for bringing this to me. I can see now I'm getting triggered by this. This is my cue. Thank you very much for that opportunity to go inwards and meditate on why this is triggering me personally.
Yeah,
So
everything that we judge or triggers us is something we have inside yet to be resolved within ourselves. Absolutely everything.
So if we're not sure whether we're dual or non-dual, well, it's just a state of meditational perception, really. It's just where your awareness is. But if you are getting triggered or polarized, then as we move into a non-dual fifth dimensional kind of new earth, then that's not really going to exist anymore. So there are your sort of your cues. But final thought before we look at the three major points, Stefan,
Yes.
if that last or second coronal mass ejection was launched on the 5th of April and it's taking around 7 to 8 days
Excuse
to
me.
hit Jupiter, that means that it must be sort of coming into view for about the 12th, right? Or
Well,
how would
that
you
one
read that?
launched a little bit slower than the first
Huh?
one, so I think it's probably going to be more like 2 weeks. Just some rough, calculations in my head. But again, you have the solar energetic particle event leading up to it. So it is already being hit with these energies, but it'll come more fully into force. I guess that would be around like the 19th or so. But these are really rough estimations.
Yeah.
I could be off several days with those. But just going off of, having studied this for a while, just that should be roughly the right time frame. One other thing I would like to point out with Jupiter is that Jupiter right now with Western tropical astrology is in its fall. And so this is the once every 12-year performance review, you could say, where it's like, okay, this is the time for Jupiterian consciousness to kind of work on some things, re-examine itself,
Yeah.
etc. And it's very interesting because this is really important as it relates to the consciousness of the entire solar system. There's evidence that Jupiter is a modulating agent on the solar cycle because
Mhm.
we have the Jupiter orbit taking 12 years and the solar cycle is approximately 12 years. And so there's no definitive answer for that yet in terms of like hard science, but there has been research done into how it may be Jupiter that's modulating and creating that 12-year solar cycle. Of course, there's multiple solar cycles. There's also an 88-year long one. There's like a solar cycle is like 300 something years long, right? There's these different variations and rhythms to solar activity, but the 12-year one's the most important. And so the sun is like, hey, you got to be good over there with yourself, bro, because you're helping guide my rhythms. And so the sun gave Jupiter a double performance review with those CMEs effectively. And then after those hit, not long after, it's going to be shifting into Cancer. I think we're going to have that new restart with kind of, in some aspect, that's a new start to the Jupiter cycle, not by like the zodiac in terms of it going into Aries, but in terms of like it going into its domicile, that's no, not domicile, into its exaltation in Cancer, right? Then that's kind of a good a good expression, going right from its fall to its domicile or to its exaltation. I think it's a very interesting connection, especially with those coronal mass ejections added into it. So
I think it's a good moment to start having a look and monitoring their cycle and their connection, because the sun has an 11-year cycle and the Jupiter has a 12. And I wonder how they are orchestrating those moves at the moment.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I think it's a huge field of open research that
Yeah.
should be done by a lot of people.
Mhm.
Well, maybe that's why Jupiter went to speak, or the sun went to speak to Jupiter first. It's like, hey, we have to get our ducks in a row. We're the two modulating forces. We have to make sure that we're on
Yeah.
the same page before we do anything else. We don't want to blow the whole joint up ahead of time. You know, this all part of a synchronized memo from upstairs. We have to also abide by the boss, whoever that might be. You know, so everyone has to get their ducks in a row, including us down here on planet Earth. You know, and we can scale up and down the spectrum of conscious awareness from ourselves down here to the plants and to the trees and then to the planets and the sun and beyond. So I guess that's kind of by way of an introduction to really the pièce de résistance for this particular interview, which is the 12th of April. And we've just put here some of the coordinates, and maybe other people will find those interesting. But really what we wanted to allude to is that on the day of the full moon, which of course for us here in the US is going to be the 12th, but for most other people is going to be actually the day beforehand.
No, the 12 for us,
So
some people the 13.
exactly. Sorry, the other way around. And so we have on this day, the 12th of April here, the blue rhythmic storm. This is the glyph of the day according to the Mayan calendar. And so this really is a catalyzing
It's the
force.
galactic return
It's
of that day,
it's the galactic return because
the
exactly,
energy.
thank you. Yes, of course, you said that earlier. So we have this lunar calendar of the 13 moons, and each one, maybe you want to explain this more, your gig, so.
So what we do is we the synchronization of a 30 moon calendar and a sacred round, which is a cycle of 260 days. So when you synchronize those two, you can have the energy of the year and then the 13 moons, and every 260 days you start something new. So this 13-moon calendar starts on the 26th of July, and it started 26th of July 2024. And we were there for the beginning in Teotihuacan with the beginning of the year. We did a big thing there. Resetting time. We'll tell you more.
For another day.
The year bearer energy up to July 24th of 2025 is the storm, the rhythmic storm, which means that it's a catalyzing energy with lots of solar flares, lots of energy, lots of changes, so that we actually evolve. But the intention, the final intention is that it's rhythmic, meaning that it achieves balance and harmony within our lives and for the world. So it's a very powerful energy. And now we're having that return on the 12th, meaning it's like when we have the test. How have you done? Are you ready for this? And then we go into the next part.
It's a nice synchronicity.
Right. So,
Beautiful.
you know, this is where rather than get afraid of things, we can actually be thankful. Wow, we have this incredible catalyzing, harmonizing, balancing energy, not just from the blue rhythmic storm, but of course also with the full moon in Libra that we'll get to in a minute. But I just mapped out the three major things here, Stefan, as I was showing you before we hit record. And that is the sequence on the day of when these things happen. And the first thing that happens is this Chiron Cazimi. which happens around about 4 p.m. UTC or about 11 a.m. CT time. And it's happening at 22:59, and it's about 3 degrees on from where the Chiron Cazimi we've already talked about in the April 8th eclipse happened last year. So essentially, it's activating pretty much the same part of the astrological chart. And now, from our perspective, working with fixed star astrology through the Stellar Nations pathway, there is a very important star here called Beta Catos, which really in the archetypal mythology of the stars of the universe and how we understand them through our off-planet ancestors is really the planet of the Hall of Mirrors. And so we can understand this as the place where maybe in other incarnations, when maybe we haven't been so great, maybe we had to participate in certain aspects of the fall, we go to this place where we get taken to this kind of prison, really, this Hall of Mirrors, to keep reflecting on ourselves until eventually the Hall of Mirrors dissolves. And we're able to see that we were just in a Hall of Mirrors in the first place, and the prison was of our own construction. So this Chiron Cazimi is absolutely whacking that star over the head again for the second year in a row and saying, are you ready to dissolve the Hall of Mirrors? Are you ready to see beyond the illusion that you were created for yourself in this basically self-created prison? And it's so interesting that it's Chiron that is getting basically a combusting process here with the sun. It's going through a death and rebirth process with this energy of the blue rhythmic storm to catalyze it, possibly even with some energy coming in from the sun. And of course, with the full moon and the Venus piece coming later in the day. But what's your take on this, Stefan, after looking at it last year and sort of feeling into the energies, the patterns as they're approaching us later this week?
Well, going back to April 8th of 2024, I definitely got triggered in a lot of ways. And so it's interesting to see my own growth with what caused that triggering now being, effectively a year later, a year and 4 days, I guess you could say. So I guess those themes will reappear. It's also interesting just kind of looking at this Chiron Cazimi and the full moon and Venus is that we do have a lot of things congregating around the North Node too,
Yep.
which is the node created by the moon,
Yep.
where it intersects with the ecliptic. And so this is a full moon, right? It's not some other transit. That would still be important, but it's made a little bit more poignant with the fact that it is a full moon. And so that is speaking to how this is like some fated move for us to all like move forward with, and it's weaving and combining all these transits together, and actually more on each side as well. Even like right now with Venus conjunct Saturn, and that is sextile to Uranus. This is all still active at this moment in time, but really we see Mercury there conjunct the North Node, speaking to like needing to actually communicate about this. I think there's with my personal story, if I'm going to use myself as just an example, back with April 8th of 2024, with how I got triggered, there was a shutdown in communication that then occurred because I didn't want to communicate. These other people, they were, it's just this whole nonsense thing. So now there needs to be kind of an opening up in communication, because that's a way to heal some of these energies that have been blocked and wounded and limited and aren't reaching their fullest expression. And maybe the wound will never fully heal because it's done now, right? Saturn is still there on that node as well, the North Node, but at least we can kind of accept it and move beyond. And then just looking in general, we see a nice trine with the moon and Jupiter during this. So there's that Jupiter energy coming in again, and Jupiter's sextile to it. So there's a nice configuration there. And I think this is just a really exciting, like 48 hours, you could say, that I'm glad that I'm coming to a greater awareness of it too, coming up.
Right. And the way I like to see Chiron is like, if this is the planet where we've come to learn about duality, polarity, and all of those things, if we were just love, then we wouldn't be learning too much. So that's why we all come with a wound, which is Chiron, that we are here to work with, learn from. But now is the time that it's saying, do you know the purpose of your wound? What did you learn from it? Can you now integrate it so that we can share it with the rest of the world? Maybe it becomes your talent, maybe it becomes your healing tool, maybe you become the wounded healer. It depends on what your wound is connected to or where it is in what house of your birth chart it is. But more than anything, this is the point with all of the wound, especially those core wounds, need to have a review of have you healed all of those, and including all of these fears and subconscious things that are still stored there are now coming for the final review, and we're going to have them right in our faces. That's why the inner work was
Yeah.
so important to be done for all of these years that we've been working.
And you know what, brother? I think that your example is probably a really good one. You know, it's a sort of an everyday kind of a situation, miscommunications. Maybe I don't know the exact details, of course, but people say things. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe then it's hard to walk back. Maybe people don't want to. Maybe people's noses are put out of joint. Whatever the situation might be. But with Mercury, I mean, it's a real family get together right here at the last few degrees of Pisces, right? We've got Pop Saturn, who's all at sea. He's lost his rings. He's completely had to retire. He's not in charge of time or anything much anymore. We've got Mercury and Venus who've already bounced into the new Earth territory of Aries and come back and said, hey, it's okay, everybody. We've got some of the terrain, we've got some of the maps, the coordinates. We're not completely lost. We sort of have an idea where we're going. We've got the nodes, of course, going in the opposite direction, but giving us a flavor of how this is going to look moving forwards. And then, of course, we have Venus, which we'll come to in a minute. So it's kind of interesting that we've got this ongoing process of endings and beginnings that basically will continue to a greater or lesser extent into the early part of 2026. But the major focus on it is now so that we can be imbued with the confidence of where we're going. Now that Pluto has got more settled in Aquarius, everything's, we're getting used to the sci-fi world, the potentiality of artificial intelligence, the pitfalls, but also the bonuses. How can we work with all of these things from a more steady place that is less polarized, this good, that bad, etc., etc. But when we realize that maybe we spoke out of turn, or maybe somebody else did, and we can't forgive them, whatever the situation might be, by actually coming back to that place and revisiting and saying, hey, maybe we can have another go at the communication with everything that we've learned from last time. And in the moment that you do that and it goes differently, that's that wound basically dealt with rather. And that's what Chiron can offer us right now, is this review process for anything like that is still down there, where we're still holding maybe bitterness, resentment, or anger, which of course is where a plant like dandelion comes in school.
And it's so important to pay attention to this process. Like first is Chiron, then the full moon, then Venus. Because Chiron is the one that is telling us, this is how you show up for your relationships with this wound. So we can identify the pattern through our relationships and our connections. So we see clearly on this full moon, because it is in the axis of relationships, how we have a connection to ourselves, our inner wound, and to the others. And then Venus comes to say, okay, let's review all of this. What is your self-worth affected by all of this? Do you feel undervalued? Do you feel affected by this? Or can you see beauty and shine your inner light? Or are you still in the wounded place? I think that is all wrapped into one in a very important moment.
So, with all of this in mind, and just being conscious of the time for today's session, we're going to move into the full moon in Libra, which is happening a little bit later in the day. But bear in mind, this is all happening on the same day, and this is why we're putting this out ahead of time. With Stefan here giving some extra input and ideas to share with all of you, because the more that we look at these things ahead of time, the more that we can get our intentions nice and clear, so that we can work with the incoming energies and help weave them or shape them. That is really what being a new Earth citizen is all about. We, the conscious creators, we, the noosphere, we're the ones in charge of all of this. And I think that that's still something that hasn't quite registered for most people yet, that what we're living in is now our creation. It's down to us, So we have this full moon in Libra, maybe to help us balance out these things from the past, to bring us to a more balanced place, so we're not getting polarized, pulled up and down, but maybe also with that Venus energy incoming later in the day also, that our heart, if put on the scales, is going to come out as light as a feather. So what do you think, Stefan? And then we'll get to Bella's take heading into the Venus piece as well.
Well, just I think it's important to recognize that we have Mars square the
Yeah.
moon and the sun, and that's also active for the Cazimi, and that is perfectly trine. Mars is perfectly trine the north node for this, so it's a major player.
Right.
And so the fact that it's so precise with the angles to both those, all three of those power centers actually, because it's the moon is its own power center, the sun is its own power center, and then that north node congregation with Mercury, with Saturn, Venus is pretty close as well. And actually, Neptune is still within the same orb as Venus, it's 3-degree orb. So the fact that Mars is perfectly trying that power center, I think, is really important. So there's also some spirit and some energy, maybe even a little bit of
Fire.
fire and feisty energy. Um, it's all there. Yeah, just that's what that's what I got right now. This is what I wanted to say. This is what I want to say.
Okay.
So, this is all then after this full moon, which Venus is in charge of. We have her going direct. Really interesting thing for people to be aware of is that we had on the 23rd to 25th of March some really critical planetary geometry.
Yeah.
And that lined up with the Venus Cazimi.
Yep.
And of course, she has like a cycle. So the next Venus Cazimi is around like January 10th or something like that. And we have very critical planetary geometry on that day too in 2026. So it's really interesting how, and this is heliocentric planetary geometry. It's really interesting how we had this incredible planetary configuration on the 23rd to 25th, and then shortly afterwards we had that huge earthquake in Burma, and all the other earthquakes that we've had since then, an earthquake seismic burst globally, and then we had that huge coronal mass ejection. Now the second one, there's definitely been like something manifested out of the quantum that affected literally the entire solar system. And that cycle's at play. It's going to come back around right at the beginning of January. And then we have Saturn and Neptune doing their conjunction in February 2026, right afterwards. So this Venus going direct here is speaking to that larger cycle as well. So there's some themes that we can pull in as well from the end of March going all the way to the beginning of next year. And they seem to be powerful because, again, we had that huge magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Burma, and then the aftershocks and this global seismic burst and the coronal mass ejection sent to Jupiter and da-da-da-da-da. So this full moon to me seems like a little bit of like, okay, can we bring in a little bit of balance and harmony to this too? Because it may be a little bit too much for some people to handle, too much chaos, which is an order beyond understanding. And it just, hopefully this kind of soothes things out a little bit. But it is right there conjunct Chiron, the sun is at least, and we have that Mars square. So I'm not sure how much balance will be achieved, but
Well, here's
regardless, it's doing its best.
it's doing
That's
its best,
good.
right? Yeah, we'll go to the Venus slide, but just one final before we move on. We have these this kind of Mars basically in this harmonious trine hitting the North Node, but of course activating all of that stuff that's there in Pisces. But also we have this ongoing sextile.
With Uranus and Pluto.
Yeah, exactly. With Uranus, that is also supporting all of this process. So, Uranus being at 25 degrees of Taurus, and then all of this stuff happening in Pisces as well. So normally these two planets, the malefics, would be the ones that are stirring things up in a perhaps, warlike way or feisty way. But this time they're here to stir things up, but perhaps in a way that is going to be beneficial as they maybe they've chilled out. Maybe Mars doesn't want to fight anymore, or maybe Saturn doesn't want to be in control anymore. Because, as we evolve and as Mother Earth and our sun evolves, so do all of the planets. So maybe they're also going through a real rebirth process now. They no longer have to be in the positions they were in before. So, just food for thought. And I think it's really good to continually look at these things and understand that as beings, we're all evolving. We're not the same as we were even 5 minutes ago. We're always learning something new. So with all of that in mind, we're going to move to the final piece of this incredibly powerful day. And I'm going to hand over to Bella to talk us through the Venus cycle a little bit to set this one up.
So super happy that you were paying attention as well to the cycle. I've been called to pay attention deeply to the whole Venus cycle, mostly because it's the closest planet to us. It's like a twin planet, and to the Mayans and the Olmec, it was the most important planet that they tracked, and they were so precise in those cycles. And they were also tracking the eclipses and the move and dances of Venus. The eclipses and Venus, they were all very, as we had the Venus star point, as you said, sandwiched between the eclipses. So I just want to go through a quick run of what's been happening with Venus. So on March the 2nd, at 10 degrees of Aries, and it's good that you look at the chart and see where this is affecting you, we started the retrograde process, which is a 40-day retro process for us to go into the underworld and do that inner process that has to do with who we truly are, our divine mission, and what we actually came to do here on Earth. So that's a very important review because it has to do with who we are and our relationships. Then on the 10th of March, it became invisible. It went down this way. Is that southeast? Southwest? Anyway, we
Southwest.
kept track of where it was going. And
Yeah.
so on the 22nd of March, it was the actual Cazimi point at 2 degrees of Aries. That was the Venus star point, which happened in the inferior conjunction, which is a very important point. That's when she actually starts a new cycle. And so that's what happens is that when she was at 2 degrees of Aries, is like telling us this is a point where we're going to become pioneers and warriors and have courage, because what's to come has to be with the blessing of the goddess energy or the feminine principle, which is all to do with everything I was just mentioning, our self-worth, the beauty, our creativity, being our true selves, and being able to shine and show that to others, because we've been able to deal with our underworld, our shadow world, or our Chiron wound, as we were saying. And then on the 27th of March, it went back and re-entered Pisces. Then on the 28th, you can show the other slide because it shows the geometry, which is what you were talking about, of what Venus actually does is it creates the 5-pointed star. On the 28th, it had a conjunction with Neptune at 29 of Pisces. So it's like, imagine Venus and Neptune being the higher octave of Venus, all to do with the spirituality. And it feels like she was given the codes to Neptune saying, okay, this is how we're going to play it now as you're entering the whole new cycle of 165 years, which is what Neptune is doing now in Aries. Then on the
An
first,
interesting point, if you don't mind. Sorry,
oh,
but just
no, no,
for the listener, an interesting thing with the Venus star point in Aries is that it's actually moving back into Pisces over the entire cycle,
yeah.
right? Because it used to be at like 5 degrees of Aries, and then before that was like 8 degrees, something like this. You know, it's every 8 years that you get a complete reset. So while Venus has been with her star point in Aries, she's shifting slowly across like a decadal time span back into Aries or Pisces with her star point. Meanwhile, Neptune with this 164-year cycle is doing the opposite, moving from Pisces into Aries. So just really interesting. I like how you talked about that handoff, the
Love
baton
it
pass.
because she always goes clockwise, but she's in a retro process, but she always moves clockwise. And she has a cycle in one sign of about 100 years. She always hits that, like the process for her to move through a whole sign takes about 100 years. So it's very powerful. And when she's going to leave Scorpio, I think sometime next year, which has been really tough. If you think that Venus, we've had Venus star points in the signs where Mars is dominant, Aries and Scorpio. No wonder that there's been so much war-like processes for so many decades. But now we're entering a process where we're going to have Venus star points in Libra and in signs where she feels good, where the Venus and the feminine principle is part of it. So we are going into a different time of process for sure, very soon, for at least 100 years, if not more.
I'll finally get a girlfriend.
I'm sure after this video,
That's why I don't have a girlfriend.
you just needed to put it out there. Now it's going to come.
Yeah, all
We'll get
right.
the applications rolling.
I mean, in all seriousness, there has been a severe lack of love in the world. I think most people agree on that in
Yeah.
the last few years, and particularly in the spiritual world. We know from running immersions in a community and retreats that there's been a serious lack of brothers in the spiritual world. So I think you're in good stead in that one, dude. I don't think
I don't
you
think
have to worry too much. But really embodying that Venus cycle, is one way to navigate the incoming challenges. Things are likely to get a little tumultuous in the 3D world, but as long as we have these anchor points, which is what we're trying to share today, then we can really work with this energy.
So let me finish the part about the cycle. Then on the 1st of April, Venus conjunct the North Node, which is like saying, okay, this is where we're going, heading north, this is the track, make sure that we're all on the right page. That was at 27 degrees of Pisces. Then on April the 3rd, she becomes visible again just before the sun rises as a morning star. So she went from being an evening star to becoming a morning star. And that what it talks about, or the Mayans, for example, when they saw that, they would decide if they would go to war, or it was full action time, like courage and let's go, let's move forward. This is the time. And this is what we're experiencing now. Now, today on the 7th is the conjunction with Saturn, which is a 25 of Pisces, which is again like, this is the structure, this is the new time, Saturn. We're going to play different this time. And I don't know if this is interesting as well. We heard that just a few days ago, the rings of Saturn, we couldn't see them from here. So they were like becoming invisible.
So
Or these,
perfectly on plane.
Yeah.
exactly. But even that is very relevant, that it's like Saturn doesn't have the time, the Chronos type of big solid structure anymore, as he's now crossing with Venus. They
Yeah,
will be,
structure disappeared
right?
temporarily.
Yes, exactly.
And they will be
Oh, wow.
closer very soon. I think it's around the 18 or 28 of April. I'm not sure. But then the big moment is the 12th of April, when she fully comes back, stationary direct at 24 of Pisces, and that is the moment of rebirth. So to me, that there are so many things converging on that day: Venus rebirth, the return of the storm year, Chiron, full moon, that full moon, which is the first full moon after that big eclipse. I mean, there are too many signs in the sky for us not to pay attention to that big moment of being the new beginnings, I would say.
And just as a sort of a fillip to all of that, if we're looking at the chart here on the left, we can see that the true Black Moon Lilith and the mean Black Moon Lilith are actually coming into what we call a Black Moon Lilith flashpoint, I think probably a little bit later on in that day. And that is where both aspects, the mean and the true, hit the same moment of exactitude. This in itself is it's a non-existent point because it's the nodes, but it actually is also showing us the shadow side of the feminine. And lo and behold, it's just moved into Scorpio, where it's somewhat in a slightly loose conjunction with Atlantis, the asteroid Atlantis. So, we can read into the asteroids what we want. We've been getting a lot more interested in the asteroids recently because we're understanding that they carry these nuanced stories, whether it's Atlantis, whether it's the asteroid of Yeshua or Sophia or Magdalene or Merlin or Manannan. All of these potentially carry different aspects of the story that we're perhaps co-narrating. And so we have that sort of perhaps that aspect of the feminine that's also needing healing here, maybe needing restoration, being brought back to balance with the Venus energy. So there are many. Yeah.
We emphasize here that the feminine principle is both in men and females, because some people think that is just for women, but it's both male and female. And as you said, right, it's about being able to love and receive love, and also being able to give, being able to receive abundance and give abundance, like being able to circulate and nurture and make sure that everybody's taken care of.
So I think we'll stop the sharing there, Stefan, as we come into perhaps a sort of conclusion for today's interview. But hopefully everyone has found that useful. Hopefully you've also found a little bit of the mapping out there useful, Stefan. But what would be your big takeaways from just sort of factoring this into the wave and energy patterns that you've been seeing coming towards us and everything we've talked about today?
Well, there's just been a lot of energy, and I think this is just another one of those culminations. And I mean, I think sometimes like knowing all this stuff, I think is half of it. Like if you just study this, even just watching this video can help you to work with these energies and to start integrating them, and to call in that higher spirit perspective or like manifestation, for example, of how you want to work with them. But it's also just like you just have to let it happen too. And there's like studying, it's great, but that doesn't mean that you then have to just go crazy designing some ritual or something. Like you can do all that as well, but you can also just let these things happen. And I think the Piscean energy is speaking to that a little bit. And there's so much right now that to perhaps try to be the master orchestrator in life is going to be probably too much. And so the Aries energy is asking us, okay, where do you want to take control? Like, be willing to let go 90% so you can really actually exert your will on the 10% that matters.
Yeah.
I think that's really a message here. So, like seeing the bigger picture, there's a lot happening. You may have a lot of thoughts, ideas, but can you just let that charge go? And on that 10% that matters, which for Chiron, it may be related to some prior wounding or things of this nature, right? Where do you need to make active progress? Like you don't heal things if you don't work at it, right? You can have a lingering injury, but until you actually start doing some like mobilization and PT, like it typically doesn't get better. But if you put the work in, things can get better. So where's that 10% that you know you need to work on if you're being honest with yourself and do it and let everything else just kind of someone else will take up the bit because that's their 10%. And so having trust and faith in that, I think that's really important. We'll get some more of these energies later in the year, like the Q4, because Saturn and Neptune will move back into Pisces. Then this does continue for a while because of the lunar nodes and even that decadal time span because of the Venus star point, for example. And there's always going to be a Pisces season every year. So, but yeah, I just see. I think you made a brilliant point, David, about how these archetypes are fluid and they're not fixed. Like Saturn malefic, Mars malefic. Well, maybe that can start to like evolve. They don't have to be
They are
seen that
moving
way.
to-
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important aspect of this as well. Just like leaving room for natural evolution and not being fixed in the way we see these things. And I think Aries can get a bad rap. I mean, I have my own personal experience. My mom's an Aries, so I get it. But like there are some wonderful higher expressions to energy. It's not like every Aries is just the petulant child, right? Let's channel those higher expressions, actually rebuild the archetype of Aries because Aries is the foundation, the beginning of the zodiac. And so we rebuild that archetypal energy of Aries through our own consciousness and what we choose, which is that's where we are right now. People are realizing we can do that. We are these co-creators of the universe. Then that rebuilds the entire zodiac.
Yes.
And we're going through that cycle, and Neptune speaking to this being a 164 year or so wavelength for that. But of course, there's others. But I think that's really powerful. Like we have the opportunity with this. Maybe we won't do it. I think we will. But we have the opportunity with this to do a complete rebuild on really our entire way of life and how we interact in civilization and how we treat the planet and how we interact with consciousness and more. So I think it's really, but we just have to be willing to let go 90%.
Yes.
If we can do that, we're good to go. That's what I'm seeing with this.
Love
I
it.
love it. I love it too. So yes, and you're right. The evolution is not because we are receiving the energy from the center of the galaxy. The evolution is not just for planet Earth, it's the whole solar system, it's the whole area where we are that we're receiving more photons from the center of the galaxy. And the sun is the filter. We receive them filtered through the sun as well. So I agree. Astrology and every system is changing. The planets are evolving, the plants are evolving, the animals are evolving.
Everything.
And the way I see us moving forward is all of us becoming more telepathic, activating our psychic abilities, being more light, being able to communicate with plants more. We already do. But with animals and being more telepathic with each other, even with many other different abilities. So we absolutely, at least personally, I feel we're definitely in the birth canal of humanity, becoming a more evolved human. You can call it cosmic human, homo luminous beings, however you want to
Cosmic
call it.
Aryan being.
But this is the process of the cycle of the Mayan that ended in 2012. We've
Yeah.
just finished our 13-year initiation. We're finishing it now. So to me, this is the absolute process that we've been trained for. This is the evolution, and we came to do this. So I think it's a very exciting moment. We volunteered to do this, and we should be super excited, even though it could look a little rocky for the next few weeks or months. We've got the tools now to do this, so
Right.
it's exciting.
We do. I wholeheartedly agree with what you said, Stefan. So I'm not going to add too much more. But if we can let go of that 90% that perhaps isn't serving us or that we're overly attached to, it actually frees up space and liberates us in ways that we can't really understand until we do it. And that's kind of like the moment of the jumping into the abyss where you have to trust. There's such an important initiation for everybody to become the sort of the cosmic human, a future New Earth citizen. But a part of that is to make that leap into the unknown and to trust that you're still going to be okay. There's always a moment where every single human has to do it. It's part of the initiation process into Ascension. But hopefully by this point, we've got enough tools, enough coordinates to make a sort of an educated leap without, thinking it's a 50-50 affair. Am I going to land on something sharp or am I going to be okay? Or am I just going to float down and maybe land in a much better space? And, as a final thought, I love the idea that perhaps this is the time for the Aries being to elevate to the much greater holistic I am, rather than the I am that needs validation or to prove itself. A bit like Mars, really, that rules Aries. It's like, I love what you said and in agreement with what I was saying, which is that the planets are also going through this evolutionary process. I don't want to be judged for the being I was 10, 20, 30 years ago. So why should I place that judgment on anything else, including the planets? And many people have commented that they believe that astrology as we know it is going to change. And maybe many people are going to have to let go of their astrological beliefs, because I would like Mars and Saturn to become more elevated beings in the same way I want the same thing for myself and everybody else. So does that mean that Mars is still going to be the malefic teenager causing trouble? No, maybe he's going to turn into a more mature young man who's into constructing new Earths with his now deposed father Saturn, who in many ways I think is a bit like Sauron, but now without the ring. There is no one ring to rule us all. We're all in this together. So Stefan, where can people find your website? And if they want to get hold of some of your awesome spirituality and any of the other things that you have going on, what's the best place?
Yeah, well, just a point. I really hope we can let go of these malefic designations because I have my Saturn right on my MC. So, like, if I can get past that, then like,
I'm
praise
feeling
the
that one for you.
Lord. Yeah, like, let's go. But you can find me on my channel at Stefan Burns. This is for YouTube. For Instagram, it's at Stefan Burns Official. For Twitter X, it's at Stefan Burns Geo. I have a website which is wildfreeorganic.com. And I have a holistic wellness store there where I offer a whole bunch of products. I make and mix my own all organic herbal tea blends, the most popular of which is spirituality. And this is great for enhancing your psychic connection, opening up your third eye, building awareness in the dream space, in the astral realm and beyond. Even just good for like a meditation, yoga nidra, etc., sound healing. And that's for everyone in the United States. There's also earthing shoes and boots on the site, plus some other things like super optical clarity quartz crystals, just like a kind of a fun new earth, you could say, marketplace that is growing and building. So if that resonates with you, you can go there, you can check that out, wildfreeorganic.com. But most of my activities on YouTube, so just again, at Stefan Burns. I release videos almost daily on what's happening with the earth energetically. So hope to see you there.
Congratulations,
Awesome.
you're
Yeah.
doing really well and you work really hard. It's like we see videos every day with lots of amazing like visuals and things. So congratulations.
So we know that many people watching this probably already watched Stefan's channel, but just wanting to really support the brother and the great work you've been doing, Stefan. We have a lot of love and respect for you, dude. And
Our
you,
tribe follows you.
yeah, most of our tribe follows you too, and I'm sure many other people out there. So keep up the good work, dude. It's a really important service that you're really providing the rest of us, so that those of us who are doing this kind of stuff, we can start to factor in your information, and maybe other people will get pulled into the conversation from different angles, and together we can start to co-create the new Earth that we all want, with all of this information, and most of all involved in offering what we have, which I think is very Venusian.
Thank you for being the sun messenger.
Yeah.
And my final words for this video, it's let's remember that we're from the earth, but we're also children of the sun, and we come from the stars, and we've come to bring heaven to earth. And this is part of the remembering process. So thank you, everybody.
In Lakesh, I am another you. Until next time, thank you to the brother. Thank you to you all, and we'll see you all again very soon. Bye for now.
Bye.